The unexpected encounter. Ethan Reyes was always the quiet, observant type. As a journalist, he made a living out of watching the world from the outside. He preferred the comfort of his small coastal town, where the world felt like a slow, sleepy place, until one night everything changed. It started like any other evening. The salty breeze brushed against his face as he walked through the town square. He had just finished covering a local town event, a simple farmer's market, and was heading back to his cabin on the outskirts of town. He'd heard strange things about the woods before, local folklore about lights and voices, but he never paid much attention. That was until he saw the light. It wasn't like anything he'd ever seen before. The flickering light in the distance, deep in the woods, drew him in like a magnet. The light wasn't natural. It didn't move like a car's headlights or a lantern's glow. It was erratic, almost otherworldly. Without thinking, Ethan felt an inexplicable pull, and without any real explanation, he found himself walking into the dense forest. The moonlight barely filtered through the thick canopy of trees. The ground was soft beneath his boots, and the air smelled damp and musty. The only sounds that surrounded him were the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. He knew the forest well. He often wandered here when he wanted to clear his head, but tonight felt different. The air was heavy, like the world was holding its breath. He walked for what seemed like miles before the light grew brighter, finally revealing its source. There, lying in a small clearing, was a woman. She was unlike any woman Ethan had ever seen. She was glowing, not from an external light, but from within. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes, large and dark, held a strange, otherworldly glint. She was dressed in what appeared to be a metallic fabric that shimmered in the moonlight. The garment looked like something from a science fiction movie, but far too real for Ethan's liking. "Are you okay?" Ethan found himself asking, his voice faltering. The woman stirred, her eyes snapping open. For a moment she looked lost, confused, and perhaps even frightened. But then her gaze locked onto his, and she seemed to relax. She didn't say anything at first. She simply stared at him, studying him in the same way he was studying her. "I don't know where I am," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't remember." Ethan hesitated. "What's your name?" She shook her head slowly. "I don't remember that either." Ethan crouched beside her, unsure of what to do. He should have been scared. He should have turned and run in the other direction. But there was something about her, something hauntingly beautiful, that kept him rooted to the spot. "Let's get you out of here," he said gently, offering her his hand. The woman took it. Her grip was cold but firm. As he helped her to her feet, she looked around, bewildered. Her eyes searched the dark forest as though trying to make sense of everything around her. It was clear that she didn't belong here. She was a mystery, and Ethan was determined to uncover it. But little did he know, this encounter would lead him down a path filled with secrets, danger, and a love that was as strange as it was beautiful. This woman, this being, wasn't just any stranger. She was about to change everything. Unraveling the past. As the days passed, Ethan found himself growing more and more entangled in the mystery of Zara. That was the name she eventually gave herself, the name she had pulled from her fragmented memories. Zara was a name that felt both foreign and familiar to her, as though it were a bridge between the life she had lost and the one she was now trying to understand. Zara had stayed with Ethan at his cabin in the woods. The place was isolated, quiet, and undisturbed by the outside world. For the first few days, she barely spoke. She seemed lost, her mind constantly drifting as if she were searching for something just beyond her grasp. Ethan, despite his natural skepticism, couldn't help but feel sympathy for her. He knew she was hiding something, but the walls around her were thick. Yet there was a fragility to her, an air of vulnerability that Ethan couldn't ignore. It wasn't until the third night that Zara opened up to him. They sat by the crackling fire in the small living room of his cabin, the flickering flames casting long shadows on the walls. I remember being somewhere else," Zara began, her voice distant, as though she were still trying to make sense of the images flashing in her mind. "A place with no sun, just darkness. I lived among people, beings, not like humans, not like you." Ethan sat still, his gaze fixed on her. Her words hung in the air, impossible to ignore. "What do you mean, not like humans?" he asked, his voice gentle. "What were they like?" Zara looked into the fire, her face a mixture of awe and fear. I'm not sure. They were like us but different. They had power abilities. We could heal with our touch, communicate without speaking. But that's not all. We weren't from here, Ethan. I wasn't born on Earth. I came from somewhere else, a distant place in the stars. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. He wasn't sure if he believed her, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Zara than met the eye. The pieces of her past were slowly falling into place, but he couldn't quite see the whole picture yet. "Why can't you remember everything?" Ethan asked. "You say you came from the stars, but it's like you've forgotten who you really are." Zara nodded, her eyes distant. "I think something happened when I arrived here. Something went wrong. I remember being on my ship, heading to a planet, but after that, it's all a blur. I don't remember how I ended up here in this forest, in this strange world." Ethan leaned forward, his mind racing. "You think you crashed here, and that's how you got to Earth?" Zara nodded slowly, her expression troubled. "Yes, I believe so, but I don't know what happened to my people. I was the only one who made it. I don't even know if they're still out there, or if I'm the last of my kind." The weight of Zara's words hung heavy in the room. Ethan's mind spun with questions. He had no frame of reference for the things Zara described. Her world, her people, her memories, nothing about it seemed to fit into the reality he knew. "Have you ever tried to contact them?" Ethan asked, his curiosity piqued. "Is there any way you could reach out to your people? Maybe they're still looking for you." Zara's eyes softened, but the sadness in them was undeniable. "I've tried. I've used everything I know, every piece of technology I have, but Earth's communications systems are far too primitive. I've tried to send signals to call out, but there's no answer. I fear they may never find me." Ethan fell silent, his heart heavy with sympathy. He had always prided himself on being a man of reason, someone who could separate fact from fiction. But Zara was challenging everything he knew. The woman sitting in front of him, glowing faintly in the low light of the cabin, wasn't just some lost soul. She was someone from beyond the stars, someone who had fallen into his life in the most unexpected way. And despite the impossibility of it all, he couldn't deny that he felt a deep, inexplicable connection to her. As the days went on, they spent more time together. Zara's memories began to return in fragments, each revelation more extraordinary than the last. She spoke of a world where cities floated in the sky, of beings that could manipulate time, and of advanced technology beyond anything Ethan could comprehend. Every conversation she shared with him was like peeling back layers of an ancient, forgotten history. But there was one thing that Zara couldn't explain: why her memories were so fractured, why there were large gaps in her past. Some nights she would wake in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, her heart racing. She'd say things like, "I was running, I was being chased," or "I saw the faces of people I knew, but I couldn't save them." Ethan was becoming more and more concerned. The more Zara opened up, the more he realized that the stakes of her situation were far higher than he could have imagined. She wasn't just a lost soul, she was a survivor, and there were forces at work that were actively hunting her. One evening, as the two of them sat outside, watching the stars twinkle in the sky, Zara turned to him with a serious expression. "Ethan, I need your help," she said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "I think someone or something is looking for me. I don't know who they are, but I can feel them, and if they find me—" Zara's voice trailed off, and she didn't need to finish the sentence. Ethan understood what she meant. If they found her, she might never get the chance to return to her home, or worse, she could become a prisoner of forces beyond her control. "I'll help you," Ethan said firmly. He wasn't sure what he was getting himself into, but one thing was certain: he couldn't just turn away. He had come too far with Zara, and despite the danger, he wasn't about to let her face it alone. Zara's eyes softened, and for the first time since he had met her, a small smile tugged at her lips. "Thank you." The secrets of the stars. The following weeks were a blur for Ethan and Zara. They spent their days trying to piece together Zara's past, searching for clues, and protecting her from whatever force was hunting her. The forest that once felt like a sanctuary now seemed to press in on them, as if the very trees whispered secrets that were beyond their understanding. Ethan had always been a man of logic. He had worked as a journalist for years, unraveling stories that seemed impossible, yet always managing to connect the dots. But Zara's situation defied everything he thought he knew about the world. Each new discovery about her past felt like a door opening to a universe he couldn't even begin to comprehend. One evening, Zara came to him with a proposal, one that would take them both into uncharted territory. She had been having recurring dreams of a hidden location deep within the woods, a place where something important had been left behind, something that might hold the key to her past. Zara believed the location was an ancient site, a remnant of her people's technology. "I need to go there," Zara said, her voice tinged with urgency. "It's the only way I can remember. The technology there could help me unlock everything, my memories, my identity, even a way to reach my people. I have to find it." Ethan looked at her, his mind racing. The idea of venturing deeper into the woods, beyond the familiar paths they had walked before, was unsettling. But the look in Zara's eyes, the determination, the fear, compelled him to agree. "Where do we start?" Ethan asked, his voice steady but with a hint of trepidation. Zara smiled, though it was faint. "I've seen fragments in my dreams. I know the general direction, but we'll need to move fast. We're not the only ones searching for it." It wasn't the first time Zara had mentioned that they weren't alone. She had sensed eyes on them for days, an invisible presence that seemed to follow their every move. Ethan had dismissed it at first, chalking it up to her fear and uncertainty. But as time went on, he began to feel it too. The woods no longer felt safe. There was something lurking, watching, waiting. They decided to leave the cabin under the cover of darkness. If anyone was following them, they hoped to evade detection. Zara led the way, her pace quick and sure, as if she had been here before. Ethan struggled to keep up, his mind still reeling from everything that had transpired since he met her. As they trekked deeper into the forest, the air grew colder, the trees taller and more imposing. Ethan could hear his heart pounding in his chest, a constant reminder of the danger they were walking into. But Zara seemed unfazed, her focus fixed on the path ahead. After several hours of walking in silence, they arrived at a clearing. It was here that Zara stopped, looking around cautiously. "This is it," she whispered almost to herself. "The place I've been dreaming of." Ethan scanned the clearing, trying to make sense of what Zara was seeing. There were no obvious signs of alien technology, no glowing symbols, no hidden devices. Just an overgrown ruin, half submerged in the earth. But there was something about it that felt different. The air was thick with energy, as though the ground itself pulsed with life. "Are you sure?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with doubt. "It doesn't look like much." Zara closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. When she opened them again, her gaze was sharp, focused. "It's here, I can feel it." Without another word, she knelt down and began to pull at the underbrush. Ethan watched, his mind racing. What was she doing, and how did she know this was the right place? Suddenly there was a soft click, followed by a low rumble. The ground beneath them shifted, and a hidden panel slowly rose from the earth, revealing an underground passageway. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "What the hell is that?" "It's a way in," Zara said, her voice steady. "My people, they built this centuries ago. It was meant to protect us from invaders, to keep our knowledge hidden from those who would misuse it." With a determined look, Zara climbed into the passageway, disappearing from sight. Ethan hesitated, then followed her, his heart pounding in his chest. The passageway was narrow, its walls made of a smooth, metallic material that glowed faintly in the dark. The air was cold, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of their footsteps. As they ventured deeper into the underground structure, Ethan's mind buzzed with questions. What had Zara's people been protecting? What kind of technology was hidden here? Finally, they reached a large chamber, its ceiling high and adorned with strange, intricate carvings. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and upon it was a small, crystalline object that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light. Zara approached it cautiously, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the crystal. The moment her fingers made contact, the crystal began to glow brighter, casting strange shadows across the walls. Zara gasped, and a sudden flood of images filled her mind, fragments of memories, visions of her home world, and flashes of her life before the crash. "I remember," Zara whispered, her voice shaking. "I remember everything." Ethan watched in awe as Zara's face transformed, as if the very essence of her being was shifting. She was no longer the confused woman he had found in the woods. She was something else entirely. The light from the crystal enveloped her, and for a brief moment, Ethan could see the truth of what she was, a being from another world with power and knowledge far beyond anything he could understand. But just as quickly, the vision faded, and Zara staggered back, her hands gripping her head as if the flood of memories had been too much to bear. "Zara, are you okay?" Ethan asked, rushing to her side. Zara blinked, her eyes clearing. I'm fine, but I remember now. I remember everything about my people, our technology, and the enemies who are after me." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Enemies. Zara nodded. They're the ones who have been following us. They want the crystal. They want to use it for their own purposes. But it's not just a source of power. It's a key to unlock the full potential of my people's technology. Whoever controls it controls everything. As Zara spoke, the ground beneath them began to tremble. Ethan heard the faint sound of footsteps approaching from behind. They weren't alone anymore. Zara's eyes widened with fear. We need to leave now. Ethan grabbed her arm, and together they raced out of the chamber, back down the passageway, just as the walls began to rumble more violently. The sound of pursuit grew louder, closer. They had no time to lose. The chase and the revelation. The underground tunnel was a blur of panic as Zara and Ethan ran through the dark, twisting passages. The air grew colder and heavier with each step, as if the very walls themselves were closing in around them. Zara's breathing was shallow, and Ethan could feel her pulse racing beneath her skin. The crystal, still clutched tightly in her hand, pulsed with a strange energy, its light casting an eerie glow along the walls. Behind them, the sound of footsteps grew louder, too loud to ignore. Whoever was chasing them wasn't far behind. The shadows seemed to come alive as they pressed forward, but the tunnel stretched endlessly in front of them, offering no immediate escape. Ethan, Zara panted, her voice strained with fear. They're not far. We need to find a way out. I can't let them take this crystal. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He had no idea who these people were or what they wanted, but the urgency in Zara's voice made it clear that the stakes were high. The crystal wasn't just some artifact. It was something much more powerful, something that could change everything. Ahead, the tunnel split into two directions. Zara paused for a moment, glancing at the two pathways, her mind clearly racing as she tried to make a decision. Finally, she pointed to the left, leading Ethan down a narrow corridor that twisted sharply into darkness. This way, she said. It'll lead us to a hidden exit, one they don't know about. Ethan didn't question her. He trusted her, though he couldn't fully understand why. They sprinted down the narrow corridor, the walls pressing in tighter with every step, the sound of pursuers' footsteps echoing behind them. The air became thicker, the atmosphere charged with a strange energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Suddenly, Zara stumbled, almost falling. Ethan reached out to catch her, pulling her back up with one arm. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Zara nodded, though the strain was evident in her expression. "I'm fine, just keep going." They pushed forward, and the passage seemed to stretch out longer than it should have. The light from the crystal flickered, casting strange, otherworldly shadows along the walls. Ethan could feel the vibrations in the air, a low hum that grew stronger the closer they got to the exit. The further they went, the more disoriented he felt, as if the very fabric of reality was starting to warp around them. Finally, they reached a large metal door at the end of the tunnel, its surface smooth and cold to the touch. Zara moved quickly, her hands trembling as she pressed a series of symbols along the door's edge. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit chamber beyond. "This is it," Zara said, her voice a mix of relief and apprehension. "This is the way out, but it won't be long before they find us." Ethan looked around the chamber, trying to make sense of the strange surroundings. It appeared to be an ancient, long-forgotten underground facility, something far beyond what he could comprehend. The walls were lined with technology that hummed with life, and glowing panels flickered intermittently, casting a faint light in the otherwise dark room. "We need to keep moving," Zara urged, taking his hand and pulling him toward a narrow corridor at the far side of the chamber. As they moved through the darkened corridors, Zara's pace quickened. They didn't speak as they moved, both knowing the urgency of the situation. But in the silence, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His mind was reeling with questions. Who were these people after Zara? What did they want with the crystal? And why had she been sent to Earth in the first place? His thoughts were interrupted by a loud crash, followed by the unmistakable sound of voices shouting. They were being followed. "Come on," Zara cried, dragging him along faster. "We don't have much time." They burst into another room, this one smaller, but no less strange. The walls were lined with glowing symbols and intricate machinery that seemed to pulse with energy. The air was thick with a strange force that seemed to resonate from the very walls themselves. "This is where it all started," Zara said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is the heart of the technology I was sent to protect." Ethan's eyes widened as he took in the surroundings. The room was like something out of a science fiction novel, an advanced control center, but with technology so alien it seemed impossible. Zara placed the crystal on a pedestal in the center of the room, and the moment it made contact, the entire room seemed to come alive. The walls began to glow brighter and the hum in the air intensified, resonating through Ethan's body like a pulse. For a moment he thought he could hear something, a voice, perhaps, or a signal. Then the sound of footsteps grew louder again and Zara's expression hardened. "They're close, we don't have much time." As the door to the room slammed open, the first of their pursuers stepped inside. A tall figure, his face obscured by a helmet, walked forward slowly, his eyes fixed on Zara and the crystal. His voice was cold and menacing as he spoke. "You're too late, Zara. The crystal belongs to us. Hand it over and we might let you live." Zara didn't flinch. Instead, she took a deep breath and stepped closer to the pedestal. "You'll never understand what this is. It's not a weapon for you to control. It's a key to something far beyond your comprehension." The man's eyes narrowed behind his helmet. "We don't need to understand, we need to control it." Before Ethan could react, Zara raised her hand and the crystal responded. A surge of energy filled the room and the air crackled with power. The man's body jerked back as though the energy was too much for him to withstand. He collapsed to the ground, motionless. Zara's face was pale, her body trembling from the effort. "I didn't want to do that," she whispered, "but I had no choice." Ethan stood there, stunned by what had just happened. He had seen Zara use some strange powers before, but never like this. It was clear now that the crystal was not just a tool. It was an extension of her, a part of her very being. "Come on," Zara said, her voice regaining strength. "We need to get out of here before they send reinforcements." Without looking back, she led Ethan through another door, and they ran once again, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. The force that was chasing them had not given up, but for now they had bought themselves some time. As they emerged from the underground complex, the stars above seemed to shine brighter, as if acknowledging the battle they had just fought. But Ethan knew the fight was far from over. Zara's enemies were relentless, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. The final stand. Ethan and Zara emerged from the underground complex, breathing heavily and drenched in sweat. The night air felt colder than usual, the faint smell of pine and earth filling their lungs as they glanced back towards the entrance. It seemed like the forest had swallowed the complex whole, leaving no trace behind. Still, Ethan knew that wasn't enough to deter their pursuers. The people after Zara weren't just after a piece of alien technology, they were after Zara herself. And they would stop at nothing to take her, and the crystal from her. Zara's eyes scanned the night sky, her brow furrowed in concentration. She seemed to be listening to something only she could hear, a subtle vibration in the air, a change in the wind. Ethan had learned to trust her instincts, knowing that they were as sharp as any weapon, but even she couldn't predict what was coming next. The crystal pulsed faintly in her hand, its soft glow illuminating her features. She looked almost otherworldly. "We don't have much time," Zara said, her voice calm despite the tension in her words. "They'll be on us soon. We need to find a place to hide and regroup." Ethan nodded, his hand tightening around the strap of his backpack. He had never thought of himself as a man who would be thrust into a situation like this, fleeing through the woods with an alien woman in possession of an ancient, powerful artifact. But here they were, fighting for survival in a world that had become far stranger than anything he could have ever imagined. They made their way through the dense forest, moving quickly but cautiously, keeping an eye on their surroundings. Every crack of a twig, every rustle in the leaves made them jump. The forest had become a labyrinth of shadows and secrets, and every tree seemed to hide an unknown danger. The weight of their pursuit hung heavily in the air, as if the very forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Eventually, they reached a secluded area, a small clearing by a stream. The water trickled softly, a calm oasis in the chaos of their situation. It was far from perfect, but it was hidden enough to give them a moment to breathe. "We can rest here," Zara said, her voice quiet, almost relieved. "Just for a little while." Ethan sat down beside the stream, his legs aching from the long run. He was tired, more tired than he could ever remember being. But he knew this wasn't the time to rest. They couldn't afford to rest. As much as he wanted to shut his eyes, to ignore the reality of the situation, he knew they were still being hunted. Zara sat beside him, the crystal still in her hand, now pressed against her chest. Her eyes were distant, lost in thought as she stared into the water. Ethan watched her, wondering just what was going through her mind. What had she left behind on her home world? Who had she been before all of this? "Do you ever wonder," Ethan began, his voice tentative, "what your life might have been like if none of this had happened?" Zara looked at him then, her eyes dark with the weight of her past. "I try not to think about it. There's no time for regrets." She paused for a moment, then added, "But sometimes I do wish I could remember. I don't know who I was before I was sent here. I don't know why I was sent to Earth. But all I know is that I have a purpose, and it's tied to that crystal." Ethan nodded, his own thoughts swirling. But why Earth? Why me? The question had been on his mind for weeks now. Why had Zara chosen him to help her? Why had their paths crossed at all? "I don't know," Zara said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it was fate, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it was always meant to be this way." Ethan didn't know what to say. There were no easy answers to any of this. He had stumbled into this world of secrets and alien technology, and now there was no turning back. He wasn't sure if he was scared or relieved, or both at the same time. Suddenly a sharp crack broke through the silence. Zara's head snapped up, her eyes wide with alarm. "They're here," she whispered, almost to herself. Before Ethan could react, she stood up quickly, pulling him to his feet. The sound of footsteps, heavy, purposeful, came from the edge of the clearing. There was no mistaking it now. They had been found. "Run," Zara shouted, grabbing Ethan's hand and dragging him into the woods once more. They didn't look back. There was no time. The trees flashed by in a blur as they pushed through the underbrush, their breaths ragged and fast. Ethan could hear the sounds of their pursuers behind them, getting closer, their footsteps crunching on the forest floor. Whoever these people were, they weren't going to stop, and they weren't afraid to chase Zara to the ends of the earth. Zara's face was determined, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. She knew they couldn't outrun them forever, but she wasn't about to give up, not when everything she had been fighting for was so close to the surface. They emerged from the woods and found themselves on the edge of a cliff, the steep drop to the valley below. There was no way forward, no way out. They had reached a dead end. "We're trapped," Ethan said, his voice hoarse. Zara didn't reply immediately. She was staring at the distant horizon, her expression unreadable. The crystal in her hand began to glow more brightly, its pulsing light casting eerie shadows on the rocks around them. "They're coming," Zara whispered almost to herself. Ethan turned, and sure enough, he could see figures emerging from the forest. They were too close now. There was no escaping. But then something unexpected happened. Zara stepped forward, holding the crystal in front of her like a shield. She closed her eyes and murmured something in a language Ethan couldn't understand, something ancient, something powerful. The air around them seemed to hum with energy, and for a moment the world itself seemed to pause. Then the ground beneath them shook. The air grew thick with an unfamiliar presence, a force that Ethan could feel in his bones. The figures that had been chasing them faltered, stepping back as if afraid of something unseen. Zara's voice rang out, stronger now, as if the crystal had amplified her power. "This is my fight," she said, her voice carrying with a resonance that seemed to echo through the very earth. "Stay behind me." Ethan felt a surge of power emanate from Zara. The world seemed to shift, the sky darkening as if responding to her command. And for the first time he saw it, a true manifestation of the power she had been hiding all this time. Zara wasn't just a woman from another world, she was a force to be reckoned with. The pursuers hesitated, clearly unsure of what they were up against. But it was too late. Zara had already unlocked something deep within herself. The energy that surrounded her crackled with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. With one final, decisive gesture, Zara raised her hand, and the energy exploded outward, a brilliant burst of light that sent shockwaves through the air. The figures in front of them were thrown back, their bodies crashing to the ground as the force of the blast reverberated through the earth. Ethan shielded his eyes from the blinding light, feeling the energy pulse around him. He couldn't believe what he was witnessing. Zara was no longer just an alien woman with a mysterious past. She was a warrior, a protector, someone capable of wielding powers beyond anything he had ever imagined. When the light faded, the clearing was silent. The forest, once alive with the sounds of pursuit, was now eerily still. Zara stood, her chest heaving, her eyes focused on the horizon. The crystal in her hand still glowed, but its light was dimming now, as if it had expended its power. "They won't be coming back," Zara said softly, her voice steady despite the exhaustion in her eyes. At least not for a while. Ethan approached her cautiously. What just happened? What was that? Zara turned to face him, a faint smile on her lips. That was the power of my people. The crystal unlocked it, helped me access abilities I didn't know I had. Ethan looked at the crystal in her hand, his mind spinning. So, what now? What happens to us? Zara's smile faded and she looked out toward the horizon once more. Now we keep moving forward. There's more to this story than just us. The crystal holds the key to something much bigger, something that could change the course of everything. We have to find the answers, together. And so, with the night sky above them, Zara and Ethan took their first steps toward whatever awaited them next, knowing that they were no longer just survivors. They were the key to a new world.